Okay, welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. The meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council website, and it will be archived for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Can I just remind you all to switch your microphone on when you're speaking and switch it off when you finish speaking, okay? So just before we start, there have been some changes to the panel's membership for the 2018-2019 year. So I'll just go through those. We've now got Councillor Lloydall from Oadby and Wigston. We have Councillor Taylor, who's come from Charnwood. And a late change to the published agenda. We've got Mrs. Richards is now the representative for Hinckley and Bosworth. So welcome to you all. We also have John Bridges, who's substituting for Councillor Pendleton from North West Leicestershire. Though Councillor Pendleton will be a full member of the panel for the 2018-19 year. So as this is the first meeting of the council year, the first item on the agenda is election of chairman. Do I have any nominations for chairman?
I nominate Councillor Joss again for the chair.
Thank you. Do we have a second for Councillor Orson? Are there any other nominations for chairman? Okay. So Councillor Orson is elected chairman for the 2018-19 year. Take the chair.
Thank you everyone for your support, and I will continue to do my best, shall we say. Just for your information, I did face the County Council Scrutiny Committee the other day, and I sat there for the first time for 2 years with Ewan, and we had 1.5 hours facing questions on this panel's work, which some record, I think, 1.5 hours, yeah. So the chairman, Simon Galton, was quite taken back, I think, even how long it took. Ewan, I'm going to ask you to do the election of vice chair, if that's okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, so the next agenda item is the election of deputy chairman. Do we have any nominations for deputy?
Can I propose Councillor Michael Rickman?
Do I have a seconder for Michael Rickman?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Any other nominations for deputy chairman? Councillor Rickman, you were appointed deputy chairman for the 2018-19 year. Welcome.
I think that's thank you.
Congratulations, Michael, and I'm sure we'll work together well. I've lost my glass. Well, this could be cool. I always forget glasses or hearing aids, so I thought I forgot my glasses then. Welcome to today's meeting of the Police and Crime Panel, which is being webcast live to the public. For those not able to watch the footage live, the webcast will be available for viewing on the County Council website after the meeting. Please can I remind members to switch their microphone on when speaking and to turn it off when they have finished speaking. You've already been informed of the changes on the panel. One thing I have to just remind us, a former member of this panel, David Slater, Councillor David Slater, passed away. It was his memorial service, but if we could just stand just for a few seconds, just remember David and the valuable work he did on this panel. Thank you, members. Minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of March. I will go slightly against the agenda as always. Go through the various pages for correctness, members. Page 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. No matters arising on there, but if I could just ask the Commissioner. Oh, Malise as well. Sorry, Malise.
Page 3, first line, held County Hall, Glenfield. It was actually held in the city.
Well spotted, Malaysia. If I could ask the Commissioner on page 4, 49.3, there were 3 current vacancies at the OPC comprising of a performance manager, project development officer and a partnership officer, and a deadline for applications to be submitted was imminent. How does those posts stand at this moment in time? Thank you very much, Paul. Any other matters arising?
We can't really have matters arising.
No, okay. Hear what you say. It's still a question. Yeah. Clarification then. Public question. I'm not aware of any. Item 5, to advise of any other items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. There are no urgent items. However, I have agreed to take agenda item 8, Deputy PCC update, before agenda item 7. And that is the Chief Constable's contract will step back just to let Kirk leave that fraction earlier. So, declarations of interest in respective items of the agenda. We have the ongoing interest noted, Manjula. Are there any others? Nope. So, moving to item 8, the Deputy PCC update. Kirk.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for taking it out of sync, as Friday's a prayer day for us in the Islamic faith between 1 and 2. But I'll just recap quickly on the last 6 months in regards to what I fed back on at the last Police and Crime panel. It's basically around the police support groups and how we've engaged with those, so the Black support group, Sikh support group, and so on. We've done some additional work with that, just as a brief update. Continue to be supportive around the gold groups, which the force run for operational matters of quite a serious level. The equality and diversity strand, which I'll come on to in a second, around some changing areas of positive action, as we've called it, going forward. Youth Commission works expanded as well, and the estate strategy and remodelling. They were the 5 and 6 areas that I fed back on last time. Some of those I'll cover in this section as well. In regards to the Youth Commission, we've moved that on quite progressively actually, and they now have a work plan for the next 12 months going forward, where they're going to look at some themed areas of work related to policing and engaging with communities. So some topical issues which you'd expect around knife crime, stop and search. One of the more interesting areas that we're looking to do a deep dive with them is potentially having a youth conference going forward, where they will establish that for LLR young people, and to bring young people together to work out how they can better engage with the police, how we can better engage with them, types of social media that's being used, because we feel there's some nuances between what we do currently and what the new social media trends are, and how we can communicate better with young people going forward. So that will be an interesting area of work. We've also started to engage with Youth Commission members attending some of the meetings. In fact, there was at the last Police and Crime panel meeting, so they can get to understand the working mechanics of what the PCC's role is, what the police's role is in these types of areas, and attend these briefings and meetings to establish the types of audience that we have to respond to, the types of questionings that we get, and so forth. And that's been quite interesting. They've also attended some meetings with Willie directly, where they've been part of the agenda, and he's took them to some of the events that he's been to as well, which they've found interesting. The force management statement, I briefly mentioned that previously. That's an ongoing piece of work. It started out as a draft document for the police, and they've done a huge amount of work on that. So credit to the team that's done that under the chief. I think it started out as the first draft of 200 plus pages, and it's kind of whittled its way down, but it's not short of 150, so it's not a slight read. And it kind of captures a number of areas across the force, and establishing demand and profiling and next steps and strengths and weaknesses and recruitment and and what the force has to offer. And it's an interesting piece of work. It will be submitted to HMIC as part of the reporting process going forward, and they will use that as an established tool now to identify when inspections will be due and what state the forces are in. I think for the first time as well across the 43 forces, it will give a document that kind of translate policing across the entire estate, and we can see what other strengths and weaknesses lie within other forces as well. So it's an interesting area of work, that is. Another new piece of work is a serious organised crime strategy that I've been working on with the Deputy Chief Constable. And this is to look at organised crime groups and urban street gangs that we have across LLR and how that fits into the national serious organised crime strategy as well, looking at modern slavery, cybercrime, the emerging knife crime threats and the organised crime threats across LLR, because we need to establish what the picture looks like to ensure that we have the best opportunities to be able to go and deal with that from a policing and operational perspective. And the serious organised crime strategy, I'm pleased to say, is not just going to be focused on policing, but for other partners as well around the table to contribute, because I don't think, and I seriously don't think, that serious organised crime can be dealt with in isolation by the police. It takes other partners to be involved in this. So that's a new piece of work. The other strategy that we've been working on is the positive action. It's in the police and crime plan. Willie made a commitment to the public in regards to making the force better representative of the communities it serves, and I must say that the Chief's done well with that, and I think we sit at 10% nationally in the top 3 or 5 forces across the country in terms of diversity and representation. But there's still work to do because the population is about 27%, so we've still got a way to go with that. So the Chief's been chairing a gold group to bring the relevant agencies within policing together to look at how we can do that. Willie's been attending those meetings to contribute that from the police and crime perspective, and we've been working behind the scenes to get the draft strategy, which is due for sign-off imminently. I think it's just text that we're going through now to get that out there. And that will be looking at how we can encourage and get more people from diverse communities, from the LGB community, more females, into the police force. Not only get them into the police force, but then how we can work them through the system so there's these glass ceilings that perceivedly exist are being broken. So we've got some senior roles in policing that are being held by people from these communities. That's due for sign-off. That's been going on for a while. We even recruited, Willie gave some money to recruit an additional officer in that team, and the force gave some money for an officer to be, or a post to be recreated, and Carolina, who leads on that, she's done a fantastic job, I must say, and I'm looking forward to that strategy going forward. Another work theme from the Commissioner that I will be looking at going forward is modern slavery. It keeps coming up on people's radar, it's coming up nationally, it's coming up locally, and we'll do some work with the Chief and his team around what else we need to do from a local perspective to address this area of modern slavery. And then there's a national PCC work themes that we go to the APC national meetings, and we're looking at positive action there as a collective. IT infrastructure, so how we can share digital platforms nationally across the country that will help with policing at a local and regional level. We're looking at platforms for best practice, specialist capabilities, force management statement I've already mentioned. Air capabilities is a big one. I'm not sure where that will go, so the resource around the helicopters that we have flying around in the sky and how they're paid for and who's paying the capital to get that fleet back up to speed would be, I guess, the politest way of saying that at this moment in time. And then obviously our regional collaborations and the National Crime Agency, their approaches to crime and how they feed into our areas of work. I guess that'd be the main ones for now, Chair. I'd happy to take any other additional questions on those points or any others.
Thanks, Kirk. Obviously, a busy time, by the sounds of it, very busy time. Members, I look to you for any questions, for clarification or for any questions at all. I have none. Maybe, Malise, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, would it be possible in future to have a written update, which we could look at before? It's slightly easier to look at it earlier and then ask questions on it than an oral one.
I wonder if Melise wouldn't mind if we took that away from the meeting today, and perhaps Joe and I discussed it at some stage in the near future and came back. If that's
I think that's the appropriate way forward, yep. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question about the air support and the force. Are there any plans to use drones in the county at all?
That's a timely question, but one I'm sure Simon would be keen to answer more than I would about the operational point of drones. But yes is the simple answer, and I'm sure Simon would expand on.
Well, I'm delighted to say that as of last Friday, we are a licensed drone pilot police force. Who knew there was such a thing? So we have got some drones. We've got some people now. We're qualified to fly them legally, and we plan to use them for all sorts. From sort of, I mean, if you know, from patrol through missing people, they're particularly useful around missing people. And it's Kirk's point really about the mix of air support. You know, what we buy into the National Air Support model, which is a mixture of fixed wing and the helicopter, which is probably what you're most familiar with. But, you know, absolutely, yeah. We've got some people who are trained, and we were just waiting for the licence. So we are now, I think it's the CAA, have licensed us as a drone flying police force. Isn't that exciting? I think that means that my Assistant Chief Constable, Mr. Masters, is technically a pilot of some sort. But with... Yeah, Jason, yeah. Yeah, not that one. Not that one. No relation. One's got an S and one hasn't. So, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Interesting, just to remind members, we're here to hold to account the police, PCC, and also to support him. That's our purpose. Kevin.
Thank you. You mentioned drones. Is there the emerging crime that's coming up now? Is drones being used to scan back gardens, etc., to through PCC? Is there any elements in your plan that was going to deal with that sort of situation at the moment? Forewarned is forearmed, as it were.
Well, obviously this is operational stuff and very important question, but I can't think that drones would have been bought by the Chief Constable if it weren't to be used on a pretty broad basis wherever it can solve and prevent crime.
Quickly, Simon, please. There's advice on the Force website about drones, who enforces what and what you can and can't do with them, which is about the issue you're talking about, which is people phoning up saying there's a drone looking at me in my garden kind of stuff. It's all the advice and what offences there may or may not be there is on the Force website. I've just got one very small question, Kurt. If I heard correctly, we talked about increasing the numbers in the force of what we call the minority communities, and I think you said 27% we stand at, and you said more work to be done. Was it 27%?
27% probably is the BAM population across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. Just under 10%, I think we're 9.4, 9.7% within the police force at this moment in time. So there's a bit of a gap, but obviously proportion would have to factor into that.
But with your work, that is increasing.
I
Yes?
think it's increased, to be fair to the force, we've increased it over a period, but it's a target that we want to improve on, and we don't just want to say that, you know, we're one of the top 3 in the country at this moment in time. We want that label to say where, you know, your workforce representation is reflective, and that's one of the targets we'll try and achieve.
Can I ask then, the question is, what's the retention rate of that group of people? Is it high, low, medium? Is it any different to the other sections of the force? Retention.
I think the retention varies because of the different levels, and we're talking about police officers and police staff now. So within police staff, the representation is higher than it is in police force officers, and I think the continuity of their time in the police force would be longer if there was officers rather than staff. And that would be across the board, I think, for staff, because all staff rotate within different roles. Rather, if you come into a police force as an officer, then you tend that to be your career for a longer period of time.
Just to add to that, one of the things we are looking at, of course, the Chief's goal group, is retention and where, of course, people sit in the hierarchy as well, and those are really important questions. And I think the figures for retention, maybe the chief will have them at his fingertips, I don't know. Retention of BAM and others with defined characteristics will be that retention is an issue, but not one that's out of control at all. But it's something that we do want to make sure is the same as elsewhere in the years to come. It's a really important part of this whole diversity issue. It's not just about recruitment, it's about retention and promotion as well. I think I can sense the chief wanting to come in here.
Chairman, and maybe I can help. In governance terms, every quarter I chair a strategic equalities and fairness board which looks at all of that data for all of the protected characteristics. Who's joined, who's left, if we know why they've left, why have they left, how old are they, how young are they, and the OPCC is represented at those meetings as part of the holding me to account. So trying to answer a question in the style which you have steered us towards, I am held to account by the OPCC being present at a quarterly board that looks at a data pack that is about 50 pages long of trends, long-term, short-term, who's done an exit interview, who hasn't done an exit interview, whether the person that's left the specials has joined the regulars. Some big data pack. And what it tells us is pretty much what Kirk said, which is the leaving is about the same as the joining. There isn't a pattern that suggests people of different protected characteristics there's no significant trends in it at this time. And obviously that can change, but at this time there isn't really significant trends. But we look at exactly that and advancement and up to what level are we represented in senior terms, and that happens quarterly. Big data pack, OPCC present. It's usually Mrs. Perry who's loitering at the back of the room there.
Abdul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask Kirk, and I'm going to be leaving for 1:30 as well, and I know we've got the item on the agenda for item 9 in relation to gang or knife crime, and that's something that's really hitting hard at the moment, not only Leicester but nationally as well. But it's in relation to cracking the issue at the school gates, and I know you said you made some success nationally, Kirk, and you were working, but are we about there enough to be able to tackle the issue, especially now schools are going to be closing, colleges are closing, and summertime's coming up and it's going to be dispersed of young people around? How much work is being done around young people?
I think knife crime statistics going up is a national trend. I don't think that's a secret to anybody around this table. I think the knife crime stats within LLR are going up, and again, that's no secret. I think the will and commitment of the police and the partners that are involved in addressing this issue is second to none, I'd have to confess. Can we be doing more? I think we could be doing more, and we're looking at every possible avenue of doing that. I mean, we just had a meeting last week with another organisation that potentially could come and help us with some of these issues around targeting young people that we know are on the radar of habitual knife carrying or associated to groups that are known for violence and serious violence. So we're always looking for opportunities to address this issue going forward, and I think it's all the partner agencies are involved in this. It's not just the police, and there's some good work that's going on in schools and out of schools. The police consistently go into schools all the time. I think more agencies should be doing that work, not just the police, because sometimes the message from the police is not the best received by these audiences for a number of different reasons. So yeah, absolutely, the stats are up, but the work is going on behind the scenes. And partners are engaged across the board to try and address this issue. And we will make some mileage and some headway on it, because it's a matter of, once we find these young people, there's another layer to that, and putting them through the criminal justice system, and then the criminal justice system being able to deal with them appropriately, so they don't just spit them back out into onto the streets where they can continue offending. So there's different layers of this that need addressing, and we're looking at all of those with wider pieces of work that Paul's doing as the Chief Executive on behalf of Willie, of how we can incorporate some bigger themes across the whole criminal justice sector rather than just looking at them in isolation.
I have Manjula and then Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy PCC, for the update. What I can say, Chair, that there is more awareness among the communities that police is dealing with the serious and heinous crime because of the local policing, and media is giving good coverage as well. My only question is about human slavery, as you mentioned. I know human slavery is a crime which has existed through the centuries and it is still going. Is there an increase in the reporting of human slavery? I mean, human slavery, mostly people are very frightened, they don't want to report. I know police has raided some of the places of employment, like factories, where they have been able to arrest some people, you know, because whether it's a child, woman, or a man. So, but do you think the police that there's an increase now in the reporting?
I'll answer this one. Both Kirk and I have got a particular interest in this modern slavery issue. I've been to meetings in the last week or two. I think it's worth saying to the panel that this is a crime that is kind of committed much more widely than people would actually like to believe it's committed. And it's committed in the city, of course, but it's committed also in county areas, even those with sparse populations. It's everywhere. And it takes a lot of very able policing to deal with it, and we have a tremendous team specifically attached to modern slavery, who I've extremely impressed by, and I know there are other parts of the force that also deal with modern slavery as a matter of course. I think there's more work to be done this. I'm talking to the Chief about it at the present time, but don't let anyone ever kid you into thinking that somehow modern slavery is an issue that's marginal and doesn't affect many of our people who live in the same country as we do. It actually does. And one of the things we are talking about at the moment particularly is the way forward as far as modern slavery is concerned in Leicestershire.
Thank you. Kevin, and then we will move on to the next item.
Yeah, very quickly. It's going back to the knife crime. Knife crime is usually associated with gangs, not all, but mostly gangs. Do we have a problem with gangs in this Leicestershire, or if we do, are we dealing with it? Do we know who they are? And you quite rightly say, once they've been caught, dealt with, do they come back out and join the gang, or is there some sort of retribution with regards to try and get them back on the straight and narrow? Thank you.
If I can answer that briefly, Chair, because it's on the agenda and we've got a paper on that which will cover some of that. But I think out of 100 habitual knife carriers that we have across LLR, I'm going to make a broad assumption statistically that roughly 25% of those will be associated to urban street gangs or organised crime groups. So the large percentage are random people that don't have a direct association or link, and that's through peer pressure, it's through social media, it's through them feeling unsafe, and for a range of different reasons. Sometimes it's just kudos for young people to be carrying knives around. So not necessarily, but in regards to the urban street gangs and the organised crime groups, we do have mapping exercises of, we know where they are, we know who they are, we know what they're doing, and we can monitor that and track that through the serious organised crime strategy that I mentioned previously. That's what we're working on right now, to have a better intelligence log, so we know which areas we need to go and do the prevention work. Because if we can stop the young people being attracted to these groups, then it will help with the fight of dealing with them at a higher level.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Kirk, and thank you for that report. Following on from that, I will, on Melissa's question, I will have a conversation with the PCC about any report in the future. And also, I'm going to ask Ewan to get in touch with your office, PCC, to look at a paper on retention rates. So obviously, Ewan will be in touch with maybe Angela at some point in the future. Yeah, don't look like that, Simon. Thank you very much. Moving on.
Could I suggest it's on more than just retention rates? I think the panel will want to know about progress being made in the diversity field.
Oh,
Retention
yes, right
rates are
across.
an important
Right
part
across.
of it,
Yeah, right
but I
across.
would want to limit it to.
Yeah, right across. Moving on, paper 7, which is, I believe, this paper, Chief Constable's contract. Am I right? Yes, I am right. This was put on your desk just before the meeting. I haven't had the time to read it myself, to be fair. But Willie, if you'd like to introduce the paper, and then I'll try and catch up with it.
I would, Chair, but I'm more than happy if you would like to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes so that your members have a chance of reading it. The reason why it hasn't put out early is because we wanted this body to be the first public body to know of the decision we've made. Well, we managed to embargo it until midnight last night, but not everyone would have read the Leicester Mercury.
You have,
Up to you.
you have it until 25 to 2 on that clock up there, and then we'll start.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to read the paper. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very good paper, a very positive paper. Delighted to read the outcome of what has obviously been negotiations. I have to say, I'm a bit surprised that the Home Office agreeing to this, but well done to the Home Office. I never heard of quite an agreement like this ever before, but well done to the Home Office for agreeing. I love what you quote at the back. The government believes in the importance of local accountability and policing and local driven priorities. The appointment or extensions of an appointment for Chief Constable is properly your decision. I think that's very appropriate to the Home Office. But Willie, if you'd like to introduce the paper.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's paper I'm absolutely delighted to bring to the Police and Crime panel today, and I did want you, I'm sorry you're not, it's been in the press earlier today before it came to you, but I think we did quite well to keep it out until midnight last night. I'm, as I say, delighted to bring it. And I agree with you. I think the Home Office have taken a very sensible view on this. I'm extremely pleased to be able to announce this decision. The reasons for it, I think, will be obvious to really all those who sit round the table today. Many of you will have known Chief Constable, and it is slightly embarrassing having to say all this with him sitting at on my right hand, but we'll get over that somehow.
Could be worse, he could be me.
That's true. That's true. But many of you have known him for 8 years, and I think it's fairly obvious and common sense that in that period he has made a mark on Leicestershire, Leicestershire and Rutland. Unlike many Chief Constables, a remarkable achievement in terms of being popular, being local, and doing the job, and that's much more important than being popular, doing the job in a sensible way for the benefit of those who live in LLR. The job has not been easy in the last 8 years. When is it ever easy? But it's certainly not been easy. There's been, we know funding's been taken away. There's been some austerity. That has meant some really hard decisions in relation to recruitment and priorities as well. There's been a change programme, of course, that's had to take place because policing changes and changing a lot at the moment. New types of crime. We talked about modern slavery that's come to the fore. Child sexual exploitation. I mean, there are others I could mention. That means that anyone who's in charge of operational policing has to have different priorities than he had a year ago or 5 years ago. Simon has dealt with that, it seems to me, very, very well. We've talked about diversity already, Chair, and Simon is a champion for diversity. And I think on those three grounds, and many others too, he's shown himself to be an excellent Chief Constable for our area. He happens to be local, which I think is a tremendous advantage, and he happens to be someone who a lot of people know or know of, and I think that's also to an advantage. So I don't think you'll be surprised when you hear that I did not want to lose or have any prospect of losing this Chief Constable from Leicestershire.
Can I, this is an appropriate time, Willie, for the benefit of those who are watching on web, and I'm pretty sure there'll be one guy in Cornwall who watches us every time. With this paper being presented late, they have no idea quite what the recommendation is. The Police and Crime Panel are asked to note the Commissioner's decision to extend the current Chief Constable's appointment of office. Do you think you could just describe very briefly what you offered and the Chief has accepted on new contract for the benefit of those on the web?
Thank you, Chair. That's a very fair interruption. Chief Constables are appointed for up to 5 years when they're appointed. There then can be a 3-year addition to that. That's what happened to this Chief Constable under my predecessor. And after the end of 8 years, 5 plus 3, it can only be for a year. What we've done, and this is unique, as I understand it, no other police force has done this. We have said, and we've agreed with Simon, that because we can only do it on an annual basis, there will be, both sides an agreement that for the next 5 years, at around this time of the year, a new contract for 12 months in each case, keeping Simon here for a further period of 5 years. It's unusual. We took legal advice on it, of course. And I have to say here, if I may, just in passing, Mrs. Angela Perry, who's already been mentioned in dispatches this afternoon, played a really important leading role in all this. We checked it with the Home Office, and as you've already pointed out, they've taken a very sensible attitude. So that's how we can bring this paper before you and ask you, hopefully, to support it. I want to, before this becomes something of a kind of love-in, I want you to understand that the Chief Constable and I do not always agree on every subject that we discuss. Indeed, it has been known for voices to be gently raised at meetings, and that's the way that it should be. But there are two factors I think that are important. One is that I think we both understand the role of the other, and that's really important under something that's comparatively new, like the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And secondly, where there are disagreements, they are always resolved in an appropriate fashion. And I think that's also important too. But I don't want you to think that everything is agreed by, anything the Chief Constable says is agreed by me, or anything I say is agreed by the Chief Constable. The system couldn't work like that, and it doesn't. But I hope the panel would prefer it if a chief and a police and crime commissioner can work sensibly together, and that's what I think we've managed to do so far. And it's on that basis that I'm really pleased and proud to offer this settlement, as it were, so that the people of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland can keep and have a Chief Constable who's already proved himself, and I'm sure will do so over the next 5 years.
Thank you very much, Lord Barb. Just before I open it up to general question, just like one small query myself.
Yes, of course.
We have 5 one-year contracts.
Indeed.
As I understand it, the first one kicks in roughly now. Next year, the second one will kick in. In the third year, because of your announcements, you will not be sitting in that chair. There'll be a new PCC. So the question is, at that point, can any new PCC rip the contract up? And the following question is, even if the PCC wants to hold to the contract, at that point in time, can the Chief Constable also rip that agreement up?
In the real world, I suppose the answer he could, or he or she, whoever sits here, could, in the same way the Chief Constable could. If I draw the analogy with football, I think I've signed up my best player for the long term. But we all know that sometimes that doesn't always happen. But I think it's an important commitment on both sides that that's how we intend to go. There's never a never in these areas. But as far as we possibly can foresee, and I think it would be a remarkably foolish new Police and Crime Commissioner who decided to tear this up, we think it's as foolproof as it can be. But of course you're right, it can never be absolutely held, because we've got to come to a new contract each year because of the state, rather ridiculous if I may say so, why I can't ask Simon to do a 5-year contract now, I'm not sure, but the law doesn't allow me to, and this is the way around it. I hope that's the best answer I can give you, I think.
Thank you very much. I certainly won't draw any analogy between the football club chairman giving confidence to his coach at all. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. I think before I give my decision, just want to share my personal experience with about the chief itself. During his appointment in 2010, and I go back in those days, it was easy to approach chief. Then his pre-successor, Matt Baggett, if I like to put it, was difficult to approach him. First public meeting was held with Chief, and he accepted the invitation without any hesitation. So to me, as in a diverse group, diverse society, he was listening to our needs, our communication, and I've said it on his face various occasions. Whether work get done or it doesn't, but you are listening. Today I'm proud to say, under his leadership, the various officers from all the ranks have come across various topics, and we have assisted and resolved a lot of issues in the area. So in 2011 or 12, I think it was, during his long sickness, we gave him outstanding award for outstanding leadership. And a proud moment for us in that time, because we resolved a lot of issues around the jewelers. So I'm proud, to have this extended contract that you have given to him, Willie. So I think we will not find a better person than Simon itself right now. And I think, as I've said on various occasions on social media, proud to have a person like him, local lads. Local. The only negativity is now he's got a beard, so if you get rid of that, I'd be nice. So that's all I can say, but proud to extend his contact, and I think we are proud to have Chief Constable like him.
Manjula and then Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the BCC for this paper. And I really support this appointment again for an extension of 5 years. And it's not a question. I want to say there are a couple of things which are missing. Leadership of Leicestershire Police, which need to be added as well. First is that during Simon's time in the police, the local policing has become really strong with the communities, because there is obviously people feel more confident to report, especially diverse communities who don't read newspapers or anything, for them to go and report it, and that has the role played by the local police officers under your leadership. That has been good. And there's a word that relationship with key stakeholders. Chair, I would like to add, with especially the work of the Chief Constable, the whole police force, with the faith communities, because we celebrate open festivals where thousands and thousands of people, they come to Leicester, and it is not possible without the police supervision, which is in the background. And next one is that, to me, mental health is not mentioned here, because Simon has led on it. And personally, as I said, I'm very appreciative of that, what has been taken. So this, I just wanted to add this. And I will support this paper. And I hope in 5 years you don't make the decision to move somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. It's not the person, it's the process that I think you've actually answered my questions anyway with regards to the rolling programme of 5 years. Each year is then reviewed and then renewed. That's my understanding of that. So from the point of view of the appointment, I think for me, having the experiences of both from your predecessor and so on, I've found that the relationship that I've witnessed between yourself and the police is one that gives you confidence in the fact that they are working together for the benefit of the community. And that's rolled down to, from my own experiences for the Community Safety Partnership point of view, where we're working even closer together to achieve what we want to achieve, and there's not this I'm over here, I'm over there, and working in silos. That's the experience I've had, and I think that's through the strong leadership, through the partnerships that you both have. So I welcome this appointment and the continuity that this will bring, and hopefully that will then carry on with the dissemination of making all of us part of the same community and working with you in the future. I think that's full credit to you. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions. Is there anything else to say? Oh, sorry, Lee, didn't realise.
Just a light-hearted comment. Have you presented him with a pair of golden handcuffs then?
I think it is clear it does have the support of the panel, and I'm almost certain it has the support of Cornwall as well, who will be watching it. Cornwall, by the way, is Barry Roper. He's the former chairman, the last chairman of the police authority, and he watches every single meeting of the police and crime panel. So it's good news that someone as far as that watches us, isn't it? So, and I understand he's coming to Leicestershire from Angela in the next couple of weeks, I think, for fish and chips or something like that, but we won't go into that. So thank you very much. Like I say, well supported, good news all round. Moving on back towards the agenda, the Strategic Partnership Board update, pages 9 to 24. Strategic Partnership Board, I'm going back to my police authority days because I'm the only one who was on the police authority looking. No, Janice has just joined us. Janice may just remember the Strategic Partnership Board was born, it was Simon's idea. But put through the police authority, and it was a board effectively for the incoming PCC to chair and to form a relationship and obviously improve delivery of the police and crime plan throughout the force area. PCC, is there anything you would like to say about this paper before we hand over to, I think perhaps Paul's going to present, I'm not sure who's going to present the paper.
Paul will present it with your permission.
Of course.
Very little. It speaks for itself. Since Paul arrived as Chief Executive, the role of the Strategic Partnership Board has been considered with great care. It's a unique it's a unique body because it brings together in a way that no other body can. It's all those who are involved in the public services in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And at a time when the need for partnership and working together has never been greater, we think that it can be used much better as a vehicle for working together for progress than it has been sometimes in the last perhaps couple of years, 2 or 3 years. And that's the basis on which Paul, who has some past expertise in this field, has grasped this issue. And if I may, I just pass on to him to tell the panel where we've got to.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, following on from the last item, it would be fair to say that Simon has been a very strong supporter of this. So it's kind of working in partnership with Simon. I think it's something to do with the beards. Probably it's giving it that support. But no, it does have, and some of the things, a lot of the things you were saying, Manjula, about the issues that have been raised are taken up through the Strategic Partnership Board. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So what is it? It is, as Willie said, it's a partnership of all the key leaders of all the public services across the whole of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. I don't think we've got anyone missing from there. We've really got the important people gathering together, supporting it. And it's been running for quite a long time. And the key thing about that is the delivery of the police and crime plan isn't something that can just be done by one agency sitting on its own. It does require a lot of input from a lot of other organisations. It requires us to have positive relationships and the ability to influence the agenda of other organisations. And that's clearly what the Strategic Partnership Board does. As Lord Barker said, it's the task that he certainly set me was to give it a tighter, more robust infrastructure and give it more sort of drive to achieve some clearly defined objectives. So that's been the initial input to try and achieve that. We've built a more of a programme office structure around it, and we've appointed somebody to lead on it who's sitting at the back there quietly. So Gurjit Samurai has joined us and has really got a grip on it and set up a lot of structure to give it the impetus that it needs. And it really feels like it's moving places now and driving some of the agendas that you were talking about earlier. One of the things that we've done is try to be clearer about the purpose. There were a lot of things that it was taking on, and those things were focused on growing demand and the interrelationships between the demand across the public services. what we're focusing on is to say that the board actually drives the work, the cross-agency work to address behaviours that are problems for local communities, behaviours that harm local communities. Just to emphasise that isn't just crime. Obviously, one of the key behaviours that threaten and cause problems for local communities is crime, but there are others as well, and they're interrelated. They link up with one another. We do that partly by addressing the people who commit those behaviours, but partly also by building resilience, and that emphasis on building resilience is a key part of some of the work that's going forward. We've focused on 4 areas of resilience: that of safety, of health, of building skills and building resources in people in local communities. We've also been trying to ensure that we pick up the sort of key issues that are facing all the agencies across the partnership. So one of Gurjit's tasks is to build relationships with those agencies, strong relationships, and ensure that we understand what the issues are from their perspective. And where possible, it's not always possible, some of these are big issues, where possible we identify ways to address those issues where we can. Governance is also not finalised yet, so this isn't a finished product. But broadly speaking, the focus of attention that we're driving on is to have a strand of the governance that is focused on what we're calling people zones, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. A strand of it is focused on building resilience, which is what used to be called victims and vulnerability, but focusing on where protection is needed and where we support those that need that protection. A strand is about managing behaviour, and particularly the behaviour of people that commit crime, but other behaviours as well. One of the emerging new areas is that of working on collaborative change across the agencies. And the final one is about how we gather and use intelligence and information and data, and how we apply that to our work. I said I'd say a little bit more about the people zones. I think you've got a paper in there anyway. Yeah, you have. So there's a fair bit in there. So I won't say an awful lot. But the People Zone initiative was built around the work that's been done previously. We've had a number of strands of work that have been led by the Strategic Partnership Board, things like Braunston Blues, things like the PAVE project, a CSE project, a number of other projects, and also similar related areas of work in lots of the local areas, local districts. And my job was to try and identify some of the key themes and build an initiative that draws the learning from those and capitalises on the experience. Some of the key themes are about collaborative work across agencies, working with and drawing on the resources of local communities, and also the theme of working locally. So that's where the notion of people zones was born. It takes account of what's there. It's not intended to be added cost. It's not intended to build added infrastructure, and it's intended to be a model that can be applied anywhere. So it's not a prescriptive blueprint of how to do things, but it's an intensive collaborative piece of work in local areas. How it will work is that we identify locally with that local community what the behaviours are that of most concern, and we identify how we as agencies will work together locally to address that. We build a local plan and we drive it forward locally, but involving the community and maximising access to the resources of the community. Building on things like the LAC, and for the life of me I can't remember what LAC stands for, local area coordinators, that's driven from public health here. And Gurjit and I have worked closely with them, for instance, to ensure that we support and work alongside them, but very locally developed areas. I won't go into detail about how it's run. The aim is that we start this off in a number of areas in September, and we're doing the work now to build a toolkit to support those local areas so that they've got the tools ready to deploy it. That's something that's underway and being done collaboratively across the different agencies that are involved. We haven't yet finalised the areas. We've got a pretty good idea, but we haven't finalised it because it needs to go back to the Strategic Partnership Board next month to be finalised. That's probably about it. I don't know, anything else you want to add to that?
Well, only this, that the community safety partnerships, and I know there are many representatives, chairs as community CSPs around the table, and people with experience of CSPs are, I think, an essential part of this and need to be involved very much with it. And I know that's your intention, Paul. And I believe that at the strategic meeting, Community Safety Partnership strategic meeting, I think actually a week today, probably in this room, you're also going to do a paper, an item on it as well. The whole point is to take people with us, to take people in local areas, in positions of authority, councillors and officers with us on this journey. But it also means involving health, particularly, which is not sometimes as easy as it is to take local authority people with you. And if it's not a partnership in the round, then its chances aren't very great. But I see this very much as part of my job as not just police commissioner, but as crime commissioner. This is for me around, among other things, trying to prevent crime, which of course is at the base of the police and crime plan, prevent crime from occurring. And that is, I think, absolutely essential. So we hope to go into some areas where there are all kinds of difficulties, not just crime difficulties, but others as well, and do what we can as partnership, as Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, in order to make people's lives a bit better.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple of comments on myself. Number one, we all know partnership work is absolutely key to the delivery of the police and crime plan, and this is where this strategic partnership board fits in. Paul did mention right at the start, you have all the key agencies or key members or whatever. Can we have a list of who those key members and agencies are? Because I haven't seen one in the report.
Yes, I'm sure you can. Are you asking me to do it now? Or
No. We will accept an email over the next few days.
That's fine.
And then,
I mean,
yeah. It's tempting, though, isn't it?
You make me squirm if you did. I mean, but they
and then I'll ask you, and once you send it to you, and you'll bring it round the membership of the board. So thanks for that, Paul. I'm looking down. I have Michael to my left, and then Rattalal.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add my congratulations to Simon staying for another 5 years. Using the football analogy, I think we could demand a very large transfer fee if there was a case for one. And also, I'm sure that the LCC will miss having Gurjit exclusively, but I believe she's staying for 2 days. So that's good. My question is a point of clarification, please, Paul. On point 29, you say 3 localities have been identified for further research. Could you tell us which those localities are?
I can tell. Are you okay with me to say? I don't suppose there's any harm in saying, is there?
In a pre-meeting, I think what we decided might be the most satisfactory answer, but it may not be satisfactory to your panel, Chairman, I don't know, was to say 1 was in the city and 2 were in the county. But it's really important that county of Leicester. I think it's really important that those who are involved in the localities are told and informed and are on board before we announce something that they may have objection to. That would be my approach, but Chair, it's your meeting, not. If you demand an answer, you have to have it.
Supplementary, if I may, what factors were taken into account when identifying the localities?
we use the I've forgotten the exact title, but it's the multiple deprivation index. Was the main tool we use. So that gives you allows you to look at individual communities at a quite granular level and identify the sort of, well, as they call it, heat spots. Identify those areas where there are instances of multiple deprivation. And to be fair, there weren't just 3. So they could have chosen a number, and as Willie rightly says, obviously we need to involve those local areas in that process. But there has been some discussion with those areas as well, and what we're keen to do is ensure that those areas that are identified are also willing and participant in this. So the areas that look likely to go ahead, but just emphasise there hasn't been a decision, are already engaged and positively supporting what's being developed. We just haven't finalised it. So I'd say it's 2 things. We looked at the data. Main one was the index of multiple deprivation. Index of multiple deprivation. A number of other bits of data. That was a key one. And we looked at the willingness and engagement of the local area.
Are you happy with that answer? Yeah, because I supported Willie on basically at the preparatory meeting and how he answered that. Rutland and then Malise.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, you mentioned in your presentation about Bronson Blue. Bronson Blue is excellent work they have been doing over the years, and they have succeeded in doing that. On similar basis, on similar principle, Leicester East were trying, but they were not successful in the project that similar to Bronson Blues. Could we have a similar kind of project that has been set up in Bronson Brew and key stakeholder partnership along in Leicester East or in that context? I don't know how many people zone you're trying to plan. Is it 2, 1 or 4 or do I 3? May I ask which areas, if I may? Sorry, think about it. I know, Melissa, but I know, and point taken on that basis. But what I'm trying to say is, and I don't know if you got the correct list of contact of the communities or anybody else who would be part of it. But I think if you can update us with that kind of a detail, would be a nice way of then we can at least approach you and say, look, these are the key people that could be done, and does and they could be a key partners in that context of setting up people's own project. You see.
Yeah. Just following on from the Braunston Blues initiative. Yes. I think that's been a fantastic project and has done an awful lot of good work. The key difference here is that had money. These are done. The idea of this approach is we want it to be sustainable. So we want it to be able to develop it within existing resource. So it's more of a realignment of existing resource than anything else. The other thing I would say, though, also in relation to the areas. We have been talking to local authorities about this, and next week I have a meeting with the chief execs of all the districts to run through this and the SPB agenda generally, and what we're thinking about doing is we will develop a toolkit, and that toolkit will be available to anybody. And so whilst we are driving the development of 3 specific areas where we think there is most necessity to work on them, we are also saying, look, there's a permissive route here. If you in a local area want to develop it yourself and you have the wherewithal to do so, then that's within your gift. We couldn't stop people doing that anyway, could we? So there is a kind of permissive path at the same time as there's a path that we're driving it forward ourselves. So if East Leicester, you're talking about, was minded to do so and had because this does require a lot of energy at the ground level for people to drive it and support it, and local leadership. If it's got that, then that's great. No problem at all. But And the other bit was about the areas, the actual areas. I think we've answered that. Okay.
Malise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you, just for clarification, in item 9, you've got Gurjit, very luckily, working for you 3 days a week. Under financial implications, you've got none. Is she being very charitable?
Yeah, she agreed to come without pay. No, I concede that point entirely, Malise. Okay, there is some cost. It's very good value for money, but there is some cost, yeah. But I suppose the point here is that's a developmental cost. It's not cost in the local area, so that's a cost to the OPCC, not a cost that is actually put upon the local area. So I suppose, but I concede your point. I concede.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the Braunston Blues, and I declare an interest. I'm a councillor for Braunston. There is some concern that the funding is going to be withdrawn from Braunston Blues in September. Is that by the police or by all the agencies involved in that? And if the funding is withdrawn, given that Braunston's an area of very high deprivation, I foresee problems going to occur from that.
Yeah, I mean, we met with Andrew Brodie, who's leading it yesterday and the day before. Yes, so it was a short-term funding arrangement due to end actually end of March, I believe originally. So there is an extension until September, and what we have agreed is that in that time, the remaining time for the Braunston Blues, what we're doing is building the infrastructure to maintain the services, albeit run in slightly different ways, without the outside external injection of extra cash. There's been a lot of learning from Braunston Blues, and that learning has been applied to things like the development of people zones. And that's what it was there for. It was there to kickstart new initiatives, to identify ways of working better, more collaboratively at the local level, and ways in particular of harnessing the resources of the local community and applying them. They have done excellent work in doing that. I've seen the way that they've drawn on local people banks. They've used the organisation Be Inspired. They've worked with the children's centres. They've done fantastic work there. The job now in the Braunston Blues is to make sure that that network of services and arrangements is still operating, albeit without the additional cash. And that's what we discussed with Andrew. There is an additional task that we've asked with Andrew, and he's very happily agreed, is that the People's Own work is developing a toolkit that obviously is modelled on some of the things like Braunston Blues, but it's still in a kind of theoretical form. And what we want to do from the basis of their experience in Braunston Blues, real life experience, hands-on work, can they test it? Can they be brutal about the development of that toolkit and tell us what will work and what won't work? So that's the other bit of work that we've asked Andrew to take on with his team. So I'm trying to avoid the question. The money will cease. The external funding will cease. The spirit and the arrangements and September is when the end of September, not the beginning. And but the aim is that there will be a strong legacy that will follow on from that work. The funding for all of the projects, not just Braunston Blues, the funding for all of the projects that have been supported will cease. I think there's one that goes on longer, but they will all cease. They were all short-term funding arrangements.
Thank you. I have two more questions. I have Alan and then Abdul, then I'll draw a line under the questions. So, Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a comment and then a question, if I may. The comment is you seem to suggest that health might not be the easiest to deal with. Not in those words, I'm paraphrasing, but as the lead member also for health and public health, I think that is the understatement of the century, bearing in mind the attempts to the sustainability and transformation plan. My sympathies and best luck. My question, though, is yes, I understand the people zones, and that seems to be one aspect of work. However, you say that the business plan will be informed by an issues log, and the issues log appears to be by type of issue rather than a geographical area. And yet earlier in the report, you're looking at large strategic areas. People are safe, people are well, so you seem to be attacking the whole of health through Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, according to that. So is there a danger of trying to be all things to all people?
It is a good question, and I have to say, that is challenging. So from a perspective of crime, I said it was about addressing the problem behaviours, and from the perspective of crime, it isn't possible to address crime without addressing issues to do with safety, issues to do with health, particularly mental health, issues to do with the skills of the individuals involved, and issues to do with the resources. You know, have they got a house? Have they got a job? Are key issues in relation to crime. Are they experiencing mental health problems, untreated mental health problems? Again, that is an issue to do with crime. Safety is clearly an issue to do with crime, not just from the perspective of, you know, the sort of the public, but many offenders have vulnerability issues as well, not least those experiencing mental health. So all of those areas are areas that are relevant to the appropriate management and dealing with the issue of crime itself. Other behaviours as well. So we felt that actually if we want to have an impact on those areas, then we have to have in place the people who can influence the health agenda, the skills agenda, and so on. What we're not doing is saying that we are going out to make, you know, to do the job of the health service and deal with, I don't know, emergency beds at winter. You know, clearly that is a remit that's beyond us. Or to deal with, you know, the sort of housing issues or that sort of thing. We are focused on the problem behaviours for local communities. That is our focus. In addressing those problem areas for local communities, we do need to draw on health, we do need to draw on local authorities and so on, but not the whole of it. You know, but it is. I take your point, Alan. I think it is complex. You know, these are complex behaviours, and you can't just deal with them in isolation only. You have to do it in partnership. You have to have a network of support, but you do need to know where's your limits, and that's often difficult to be precise about. So I take your point.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Paul, for quite a good answer to a very good question. Abdul, and then we will move forward to the next paper.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting concept to be able to move on it, but are you then looking at current infrastructure that's already in place where there are resources, and would you be pulling in those resources, or will you bring in additional new resource within these areas? But my fundamental question is one about there are some natural areas within the city that people identify with, and would you be looking at those natural areas, or geographical or political?
Yeah, and so the areas at first, yes, well, we're looking for natural area. So we're looking at the community area. Do you want to? Should I pause a bit?
Shall I elaborate on the natural? I mean, take St Matthew's one, and Braunston is another in case.
Yeah.
I mean, these are areas where people relate to, or Belgrave, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Highfields.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
And you know, these are the sorts of areas. But then you've got overlapping wards, and then you've got overlapping. The policing areas differ from the ward areas and the ward boundaries. And they spill over constituencies, and they spill over wards. So we're finding two sergeants coming in to ward community meetings saying, oh, across the road it's Hamilton, and across the other side is Spinney Hill. So, you know, we're finding those sorts of conflicts. So those need to be resolved as well.
That's right. So if I were to show you the areas, we would have a line drawn on a map, and that would be a specific area, and it would go down this road and down that road and round that road. It is very, very clear where it is, and that's identified. So we did the kind of high level analysis, and then we've talked to the local authority and said, let's fine tune this together. Where do you think we should look at within that area? What's the area that you think we need to focus most closely on? So it's a very, very clearly defined geographical area. That's what we're talking about. You can draw it on the map. That's one thing. The other bit about, are we bringing in new resource? No. The aim is that we are working within the existing resource. In fact, just taking that a step further, what we have in the toolkit is a set of roles. So clearly this to drive this needs a bit of leadership. It needs some coordination. It needs the engagement with local communities and so on. We're defining those roles, but we're not saying you need to appoint somebody or bring someone in from outside. That's within the existing people from the local agencies or community that will assume those roles. And we're not being prescriptive. We're not saying it has to be the chief inspector. It could be the fire officer, it could be anyone from those agencies. What we're looking for is positive engagement. And also we're not looking to create, the danger we thought was there'll be a massive new infrastructure that everyone will have to go to a new set of meetings each week. We're not doing that either. So, in some areas, for instance, in most areas there are lots of existing meetings. There are community safety partnership meetings, there are JAGs, there are local neighbourhood meetings. We're not looking to create new things, we're looking to work with that existing infrastructure. So we thought if we do new things, if we set up new initiatives, things will fail because people won't have the bandwidth to do a lot of new activity. What we want to do is draw on what's there now as far as we can.
Thank you very much, members. I'd said that would be the last question, and that's the way it will be now. There is a recommendation at number 3, but I have to congratulate Paul. You gave some really good answers there, actually. I quite enjoyed listening to it. And what was excellent, you stopped any supplementaries coming in, so because of the detail, but still wrapped up fairly quite tightly. So thank you for that, Paul. There is a recommendation at item 3 that the Police and Crime Panel note the contents of the paper. All okay? Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, item 10, knife crime stop search. It's a report written by Superintendent Shane O'Neill. There are recommendations at 4, 5, 6 and 7 to be looked at after the PCC has presented this. This paper was... we asked for this paper, when I say we, that's you and myself. We picked it up effectively from the BBC News, where the Home Office, or was it Theresa May even? I can't remember. It was a minister who said maybe it's time to reverse the stop and search from being a reduction to an increase in stop and search, which all started a reduction. Trevor Phillips' report, wasn't it, in 2010-ish, the Equality Rights Commission guy. And I can remember you had gold groups and silver groups and bronze groups. David Parsons he left the earth at one point in time over it, quite rightly so as well. Massive changes in the use of stop and search followed that. And like I say, purely because of the BBC News report from the government, maybe it's time to reverse. And so we asked for this report. Obviously, it fits in nicely with knife crime as well. So PCC, if I could ask you to present the report.
I'm being very quick and pass on, if I may, to the Chief Constable. The relevance, obviously, with you holding me to account, is that something like stop and search and knife crime, both of them, but stop and search in particular, is a matter that affects the public in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, one way or the other, very intensely. And obviously there's been lots of debates over the years around its use and otherwise. But clearly, in many ways, this is an operational issue too. That's what it fundamentally is. How many stop and searches, why do the police do it, when do they do and when don't they do it? And I think that's relevant to the kind of view I, in Kirk, have to make about it. So I make no apology for having invited the Chief Constable to come along and speak to this issue of stop and search and knife crime. I think Superintendent O'Neill's report is a helpful start to the conversation. So with your permission, Chair, I'll pass on to Simon now. I may have something to say myself later.
Chief Constable.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the earlier comments as well. I've never more wished I'd told my mother to watch something, because she would have been proud and she would have approved of all the beard hate as well. So I'm lucky I've got a fantastic team. And there's a job to be done, and this is the kind of thing we need to do. And you're right to highlight. So my first day, the first letter I got was from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, offering me the unique opportunity to suffer custodial penalties if I didn't make sure our use of stop and search was more proportionate.
Just very quickly, Simon, wasn't it Thames Valley and Leicestershire?
It certainly was, yes.
Just those two, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yes. And just as a context, at that point we were doing about 75 stop and searches a day. Lots of them were around soft drugs, and how targeted they were on the people who were the most harmful would be an interesting discussion. So then you've gone through the best use of stop and search scheme, which is a voluntary scheme, which we succeeded actually in getting thrown off, which I thought was quite good. How you can get thrown off a voluntary scheme, I don't know, but we were. We're now back on it, so that sets standards. So, for instance, the other day when we used the Section 60 powers, it requires that that is publicised, and it was publicised. And then the Inspectorate did a big audit nationally, which is still an audit that rubs with police forces, where the big issue was smelling cannabis a legitimate ground for stop and search, or did you need something else? So I would say the mood music has not encouraged us to use stop and search across that period, and the mood music seems to have changed quite a lot. So what the paper tries to do is say, where are we now? And obviously for us it is fundamentally linked, and it's been alluded to by a couple of members earlier, to the sense of knife crime and street crime in particular. And something I'd want to say quite early, within some of this knife crime data, please don't forget that a chunk of that is around domestic abuse and people taking stuff out the kitchen drawer. It isn't stuff on the street. But so what the paper tries to do is capture what we've been doing with partners, and Kirk alluded to that earlier. So it's asking you to acknowledge that work, which has to be multi-agency work. We are using coercive powers. We can stop you, and we can turn you over, and we can handcuff you to do it, and we can put our hands in your pocket. It is a pretty intrusive power. It doesn't stand alone. We can do the enforcement part, and it does link to the Lives Not Knives work. And then, so if I just whiz through, there's been an increase in what we're seeing. That's a combination of more activity by us and more focus to that activity. It's an increase in our data capture, and you've had reports previously about crime data integrity. And obviously it's become a thing, and there probably are more actual offences. So at 11 you can see the strategic aims around knife crime, and then that takes us at 12 into the key areas. So we've done loads of analysis and work, and the areas listed there, so East Leicester, West Leicester, Loughborough and the city centre itself are the areas where we see the focus. Knife Prevention Group, and Kirk's already alluded to it, the Knife Prevention Group is a pretty motivated and energised cross-agency group, and it has then as a consequence done things like brought a real focus on habitual knife carriers, of which there are about 100. And you can be reassured someone else, whilst only Barry Roper might be watching this, the Leicester Mercury definitely read the papers, because it was the front page of the paper the day after this went up on your website. So the habitual knife carriers, as he says at 15, suffer or have experienced what are being known at the moment as adverse childhood experiences. And there is always some exceptions that prove those rules, but people who haven't always got on with the education system, people who've been in social care, people who have seen particularly perhaps violence in their family home, the link to gangs, which was mentioned by a member earlier, and some organised crime and antisocial behaviour. We do have a group which looks at how we use our powers, and they even go as far as dip sampling, stops and searches. So all our stops and searches are now on body-worn video. You may recall that that's a personal issue. So if you do a stop and search, the expectation is that that's recorded, and that's explained to the person who you're stopping and searching. And then the panel, which is not police officers, it's a lay panel, they actually watch a dip sample of those back to see how they are done. Because for me, this is how you do it. You could do a stop and search and shake hands and walk away afterwards, or you can do a stop and search and finish rolling around on the floor in the cell block. There's a thing for us about how we do it. Of course, there is a thing about how that is received. Again, it's been alluded to by Kirk earlier. This links into some of the serious violence crime work. Take it to 22. Possession offences. We are finding, by focusing when we are looking and where we are looking, we are finding more weapons. The partnership work is really important, and you can see at 27, 28, 29, I think it goes to what was asked earlier. So schools, big education intervention package, which includes some video material. It includes things like the mother of a knife crime victim going and talking to the kids about what it is like when the police come and knock on your door and say, I'm really sorry, but. The youth services are hugely involved, and they've got some young people to design a campaign called A Slice of Reality, because with the best will in the world, Shane and me telling everybody it's not a good idea maybe doesn't have the same impact as it coming from other young people. The Warning Zone charity in the city have introduced for Year 6 an interactive section around knife crime, which sort of shows truth and consequences. Which the OPCC have been involved in funding. And then there's a set of kind of indicators, and then just to sort of push through. Other things, what are we trying to do? The habitual knife carriers, well, we're trying to help them not to carry and make them understand the risks and give them some opportunities to move away. Other things in Nottingham, they've got an interesting diversion scheme at the hospital. We're doing lots of work with the hospital about what is and isn't reported to us. And it must be said, a number of the kind of offences that we have, we don't always get cooperation from the victims. Willie sees those briefings as I do. It is not uncommon where you've got somebody who's turned up at A&E with a stab wound, where they don't want to tell you how it happened, or they tell you that they fell over in the kitchen. The concept being explored in Nottingham and that's being explored here is around the fact that somebody at the point they're at hospital watching their mate be treated or being treated themselves might be the best point when they're most receptive to a message from someone other than a police officer. So there's a kind of opportunity in there, and we're just exploring that. So the other thing we're trying to do is upskill our people so they are confident to use stop and search. They know how to do one. These things you might have seen in the Mercury this week. We stopped and searched 5 people in the city centre. There was a crowd of several hundred people watched it and videoed it. That's quite a high-pressured environment to deliver a stop and search in, and so we need to make sure our people are confident. 41 onwards sort of covers the scrutiny, and it is important that we have scrutiny. The inspection that the HMI does around legitimacy looks at how we use our coercive powers. So that's everything from how often we point a taser through to how often we actually stop and search somebody, through to how often we actually pull a trigger on a taser. And every use of force now we have to record and capture in a way that is probably useful but isn't without its own bureaucracy. You will also remember, Chair, we used to have to record every stop and account, and that was got rid of because we were spending hours and hours saying, so where are you going, Mr. Orson? Stop and account? Or where are you going in your best time, Mr. Orson? Stop and account. And so that was got rid of. Your only tie. I thought you had a Nottingham Forest one as well, Chair, but we were going to perhaps leave that. So you can see there's a legitimacy group trying to provide some oversight. The context of this is there is a big debate ongoing about on-street crime. You can see that playing particularly in London, and part of us being visible and getting in the face of some people is about making it really clear that the streets are safe and that you can walk down them. 45 is an important paragraph, I'd suggest. So positive outcome rate of about 30%. So that means a third of our stop and searches turn up something that we would see as useful. And just to help people, if you found someone with a small amount of a drug that was for personal possession, there are ways of dealing with that without arrest. Hence why there's a difference between a positive outcome level and an arrest level. And also some of these are pretty young people, and you get straight into the debate about do you want to criminalise somebody or do you not. So there's a bit of a judgment issue in there for us to make all the time. And then you can see some data, and if I could just quickly pick up, there's been a couple of things highlighted. Yes, we do use knife wands. Yes, we're using knife arches. They are very well received in general terms by the public. There is no power to make someone go through a knife arch, and there is a small minority who regard it as an imposition on their human rights to even be asked to go through one, but I would stress they're quite a small minority. But certainly if we're stood by a knife arch and someone doesn't want to go through, if you want to get to chat to a police officer, that's quite a good way of getting to chat to a police officer, because the obvious reason for not going through is you've got a knife on you. So we're doing that, and those are pretty focused around nighttime economy and the like. Somebody asked about the drop-off in the February. It was cold. There are 3 days less than in the other months. I don't think it's particularly statistically significant. And if you looked at the previous February was a really grim month for knife deaths and murders. We've had huge support from all sorts of people, from Anthony Joshua, who's done a rather good video where he says, hey, look, I was a bit of a bad lad, but you know what? Carrying a knife wasn't a good thing. The father of Lorick Lobato, who was a young man who was a student in the city who was murdered, has done an incredibly powerful video. If you haven't watched that, that's pretty gritty stuff. And Amy Morgan, whose son Tyler Thompson was killed, she's done lots of stuff in schools. Handed a petition in at Downing Street, I think, with the MP for Leicester East.
Leicester East with a private members bill.
Who has a private members bill about it. So lots and lots and lots of work going on. There is always more to do, but there's a combination of enforcement and education ongoing, which is available really from year 6 onwards. And actually the warning zone is interesting because its coverage now, it's pretty close to 90% of schools in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. An interesting question for you all as councillors might be asking your local schools if they do or don't go, because I know who doesn't. But that would be dead unfair on them, wouldn't it? So loads and loads of work, big issue. It's a community confidence issue. It is a partnership game. But we will be in the face of people who want to carry weapons, and we will take them off and off the streets.
Thanks, Chief Councillor. Anything else to say, Lord Bart?
Just to say the increase in the stop and search figures are ones that I support. I think it's been a sensible, reasonable move in the course of the last few months for obvious reasons why those figures should go up. And I'm satisfied that they are being done. I'm not saying in every single case are being done in a proper and appropriate way. And that's absolutely essential, of course.
Yep. So I just would say we do not have. I'm not quite confident to say we've got no current complaints about stop and search, but it's kind of 1 or 2 at the very most complaints about stops and searches and how they've been done. And if there's an issue about them, here's a film of what happened, and you can have a look.
Before we start the question, just like to remind all members to keep their questions strategic. If you have localised issues you want to raise, please do it after the meeting with the Chief Constable. And that really is a big please. Anything localised, wait till after the meeting. Just one very small question for myself before we start in general. Chief Constable, you mentioned that obviously body cam records the stop and search. You mentioned an independent panel views these films, or whatever you like to call it. I have to presume they are dip sampled. There can't be all of them.
It's paragraph 44, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. I have Stephen and then Deborah.
Thanks, Chair. I've got several questions to ask. Can I ask them all at once? rather than go back and forward?
Ask them all at once.
Okay, fine. Firstly, can I just say it's really sad to see the increase in knife crime, not just here in the county, but across the whole country. Simon, you said that Leicester Police have got a knife arch scanner that's been used in the city centre and other locations. Are there any plans to increase the amount of these scanners you actually have to try and deter people from carrying knives and show our intolerance, can't say the word, of knife crime? And my second question is, can we be reassured that all stop searches are done as discreetly as possible, that they are fair and appropriate and apply to all races, as the perception is that black people are unfairly picked upon for these searches? And I do note in the paperwork there's no mention of ethnicity within the data. And my final question might be a bit political, but given that youth facilities across the city have been reduced dramatically through cuts to grants, do you believe these cuts have had an adverse effect on knife and crime stats?
I'll do the last one first, Chair. It's political. Willie will take that. Discreetly is an interesting word. I mean, we try and do them professionally. We might ask people to come into a vehicle with us. We might take them to one side. But if you're in the middle of Leicester city centre at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there is a limit to how discreetly you can be. Disproportionality is something that's that's what's looked at. You were 8 times more likely if you were from a BME community to be searched as a white person than a white person. That's now down to 3.8 or 3.9 or something. We actually statistically under-search Asian people and slightly over-search black people, if you accept that the absolute measure of that statistic is against the population. There's quite an interesting debate about available populations and also about, if you're using the technique to deal with certain sorts of crime, is it likely to reflect who gets involved in certain sorts of crime? If that makes some sense. So we also probably under-search women as well. And certainly in my former life in the West Midlands, it wasn't uncommon there for firearms to be carried by women, because the cops, who are more men than women, we've got to wait for half an hour to get a woman here to set. So there's a kind of thing. So we look at it really carefully. That's the panel is a diverse panel for that reason, to try and be very transparent about that. We've got a few scanners. I don't hear a great cry for lots more, but I can ask again. I mean, the scanners are being used against, particularly nighttime economy, in and around the city, quite early doors. And in fact, next Friday, we're going to do, we do usually do the What Matters to You sessions in, supermarkets where they're near a coffee shop. Next Friday, we're going out into the middle of the city to do our What Matters to You sessions with the people who are using the city's nighttime economy. So I don't hear a great clamour for more scanners. We use them in a pretty focused way, and they're a useful bit of kit. And just right at the start, what we're seeing is an increase in recorded knife crime. I do think there probably has been more, but I do think there's a set of things going on about what's recorded and what's flagged, and there is a difference, just to add to it all, between what the national stats capture and what they don't. So the Office for National Statistics, when they're talking about knife crime, they're talking about a knife being used in attempt murder, threats to kill, actual bodily harm, grievous bodily harm, robbery, rape and sexual assault, but not possession. When we're talking about it, we count possession because that's what we're doing on the street. So we have to do a formal return. So there's lots going on, and the monitoring around the diversity of it is a big part of that.
Was that your supplementary answer?
Not quite. I just wanted to clarify that my question was about using these knife arches, not just in the city, but across the county as well, like Melton and Hinckley and that. Simply so, not on a regular basis, but as a deterrent, so people know it can actually happen.
I think he probably knows what I'm going to say. When I attended a public meeting in Milton, I came under heavy criticism for wasting my time using a knife arch outside the pubs of Melton, where apparently nobody carries a knife at all. So we've used them so much, I've been criticised for them. I can't think of a higher praise for the tactic being used. Is that fair? You were there? Yeah.
Yeah, my leaves was there.
Question was something like, "What the bloody hell are you doing using a knife at Archie Melton? Why aren't you in the city?" So hey.
And I chaired that meeting. I was there too and heard it myself. Yeah, yeah. I have Deborah and then Abdul.
Thank you, Chair. Just for Lord Willie, just picking up on Simon's point about victims not speaking up and not wanting to divulge any information. What are you doing about putting in some support packages for the victims to encourage them to speak up, and especially if it's a young person, work in the schools, you know, just to encourage more people to speak up?
It's a very good question. I mean, we've just given a contract out as far as victim services are concerned, but of course, if someone's not going to make a complaint, they're not going to find themselves helped by victim first, are they? I think given every encouragement by the police, every encouragement to come forward, from protection to doing the right thing, but it's very hard, and it's not the only offence where this happens. We know, for example, in sexual offences, for example, very often the victim, and severe victim, won't stick with the story, isn't prepared to give evidence, isn't prepared to make a statement, and that's, I say, absolutely true in knife crime as well. If there are any proposals, any suggestions about what the police could do better, how we could deal with it better, that would be, they'd be gratefully received. Somehow the message ought to get across to victims that you've been wronged and that you have a remedy. But I'm afraid that in itself won't work. Chief might have an idea.
Just two quick points about it. I mean, at the risk of sort of slightly stereotyping, I think there are two sets of people who don't want to cooperate. One is people who are vulnerable, have been bullied or oppressed into a situation, and some are people who have made a lifestyle choice and who we've already known from the lifestyle choice that they've made, which is posh speak for they're people that we've locked up before for being involved in this sort of stuff, and it's the kind of a murder, I'm not telling you nothing kind of thing. And the hospital intervention that's touched on at 35 and 36 in the paper is about, you know, a cop turning up at that point and talking to someone who has maybe chosen to be involved in gangs or the drugs trade and saying, hey, what you're doing isn't the best intervention to stop them reappearing in that situation again. So there's kind of two bits to it. So there's a set of people who are vulnerable and need an arm around them, and there's a set of people who their career choice is different to you or I's. And so, you know, there's kind of different grades of dealing with it. Early hours of last week, I was on call last week, there were two incidents in the city, nobody dreadfully badly hurt, but people that were hurt. Neither of those incidents, the people involved wanted to tell us who'd done what to them. Luckily, we were able to help them by identifying who that was and locking them up, but people don't always want to cooperate, and some of that's because they're under pressure, and some of that's because they've chosen a career which is to do with crime.
Locking them up is important, arresting them is important, but getting a conviction home against them is pretty damn difficult without a victim who's prepared to come forward.
Thank you. I now have Abdul and then Keith.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to some of the stats that may be of interest to me, would you provide us these later on in relation to the age groups as to numbers and also BME? And I know you broke down the BME a bit more in relation to Black, Asian, but it might be useful to put them in some perspective in relation to the numbers. And the last one is whether it's high time that we call an amnesty in relation to asking people to give up some of these knives and drop them off somewhere.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, we've done an amnesty in the past. You know, they have some use, and no doubt we get some stuff off the streets that we otherwise wouldn't. We get some big, horrible-looking weapons handed in, so we have done that, and you know, we could always repeat that. The data around Stop Search, we have to publish. It's part of the Best Use of Stop and Search scheme, so lots of it is on our website, and we, you know, it has to be broken down by age and ethnicity, amongst other things. So we, you know, if the panel want that, we can do that really easy, and it's to a point on the website already.
Thank you very much. I now have Keith and then Rattanel.
Thank you, Chair. When you took us through this, I was so pleased that you dwelt on the paragraphs 27 to 29, emphasising the educational input. I know from experience that the warning zone really makes an impact. And I was so pleased, Lord Bart, that you mentioned that you do actually help fund this programme, because I think if we can get children at that age, when they're moving into secondary education, to become aware of the dangers. I know many people say when children go to secondary school, something's taken out of there. They forget certain things, but I think that work is vitally important. So I think it's very good that it is funded by the office. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we visited the other day to open, as it were, the knives thing, and you can't help but be very impressed by what it looks like. And actually, I think members of the panel should, if they can, get to just see what Warning Zone looks like altogether, because it's pretty fantastic. What's absolutely vital is that kids from schools all over manage to get there. And sometimes I think that's what they said to me, that some head teachers occasionally haven't applied in time, and so they don't go. But actually, this is something that all kids should go to. And that's really important. Thank you for what you said.
I'd agree with that. I think it ought to be heads for Melton and Rutland and everywhere, because I do think the message has got to be universal. So thank you.
When I was there, I was telling Joe, the chairman, the other day, that were kids from Melton Primary School who were there that day and getting a great deal out of it. It's obvious.
Thank you very much. Raphael, then Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the question you have answered, Chief. But my question is around, as a councillors, how can we assist in prevention measures rather than operational reason? How can we assist you in dealing with the situation? Could we see upper hand or going out with the local officers, whether it is daytime or nighttime, mainly it's nighttime, and see ourselves the operation that is taking place?
Yeah, very welcome to do that. I mean, just some quick thoughts. One, ask your schools what they're doing. Are you going to warning zone? Yes or no? What are you doing? Have you had recent sessions? What are your concerns? Community safety partnerships have a key role in all of this. You know, what are the plans around the habitual knife carriers? Are they being looked at and done? What's going to happen in the school holidays? The point has been made a couple of times. Yeah, so what does happen in the school holidays is everybody gets 6 or 7 weeks. So what's available for young people locally? How does that link in? I mean, in the past we've had things like street cricket and street basketball, and the riders and the cricket club and the football have been hugely active in delivering stuff. But, you know, as the devil makes work for idle hands is a phrase that springs to mind. You'd be very welcome to come out on Viceroy, and as the paper highlights, and I'd want to be really clear, the partnership group is a partnership group, and there's huge input from the council, which you are on amongst others, and just checking out that and supporting some of the youth work that's being done would be really helpful as well. But you'd be very welcome to come out if that was something that you felt was useful.
Alan, and then Kevin, and then I'll draw a line under Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I should say first, I'm happy with the text of the report and the recommendations. They're absolutely fine. I can see a point in the future where we'll have to justify what we're agreeing to. And I have to say, I find a little bit of difficulty looking at the charts at the back, the possession offences against the searches being based on different time spans. It's a little difficult to correlate the two together. But more importantly, perhaps going forwards, based on what Simon has said about the data he holds, or that is on the website, could we have going forward the percentage of positive searches as a trend? I'm not sure how the public would respond if we increase greatly the number of searches, but as a result we have less and less percentage positive results, or whether that would be seen as a positive outcome. So I'm not quite sure what the answer would be, but I'd love to see the pattern.
I mean, I guess one of the tests for us in terms of legitimacy and fairness is the perception of what a stop search, stop search is described in occasion by some people as a really kind of negative and stigmatising experience, and Stephen raised the point about being discreet about it. As a citizen, how dreadful an imposition on you is it to be asked very politely and civilly by someone you pay for as a citizen, where are you going, what are you doing? I think it depends where you are and what the circumstances are, and if the officer forms reasonable grounds to suspect that you may be carrying items that are prohibited, then they have a power to stop and search you. Now, how great an imposition on you that is a really interesting question. But because it is treated as quite a dreadful thing in some quarters, and from my point of view, I'm not sure it is. 5 minutes of your time to help keep people safe. So, but your point's really well made, because success would look like we're finding less, which would mean it would look like our searches are less focused. So that I think that's the whole sort of transparency around this is key. Are we doing them in the right places? Are we doing them with the right people? And local communities can help. Local communities tell us who they think these people are in the first place quite often. So it's a really tricky issue. We've got lots and lots of data, and I mean the other sort of thing would be interesting, and I don't know what reporting back there is from the partnership group into the other organisations that are here, because I mean you made the point earlier, Chair, you're at a scrutiny committee. The County Council are involved in this group and presumably reported fulsomely on their activities within this part of the work.
The answer's got to be yes, that. And that would go through Ivan Old, wouldn't it, nowadays? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Alan, is there anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Kevin, final question.
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly, the question's already been asked about what the community safety partnerships could do. Simon mentioned about the warning zone and the schools that have attended, but the schools which haven't. From our point of view, if we know they are, we can certainly then, from a community safety point of view, write to those particular schools and ask, are they going to do it? And if there is a funding element, I'm not suggesting that we could pay for that, but we can probably work with them to see if we can get them there.
And look, as a parent of a child or two children who seem to go on lots of trips, which I have to pay £7.50 towards the bus fare, I suppose one of my concerns is if school X goes to the warning zone, do some of the children who have most experienced the kind of things that happen and are described in paragraph 15 not go just for financial reasons? So I think there's a thing for CSPs and schools to make sure that the people who maybe most are at risk of getting sucked into this go and do that, rather than the people that can afford the £5 or £7.50 or whatever it is. Varies by school, it seems to me. So there's a really sound point in what Kevin says.
I think Kevin wants to come back.
If there's anything we can do, obviously we'll do it. But also, we're probably people around here who are governors of schools. I know I'm a governor of an academy, and I chair a particular committee where this would come to. So if they're not taking part, I would certainly have it on the agenda to say, why aren't you doing it, and so on. So if we can do that, then fine.
This isn't a political point, of course, but many schools are academies these days, and it's not as easy, I don't suppose, for local councillors to make the effect that they would have been able to do in the old days. But I don't think that should stop them trying, because it's so obvious that schools should go at year 6 to warning zone.
I suppose there's nothing stopping a CSP write it to all the schools. Relatively easily done, isn't it? Yeah. We'll have to leave that to certainly 3 CSP chairs. Have you had your first meeting yet, Deborah? Okay, not quite 3, but nearly 3. So 3, yes, we'll have to leave that to them and the others, of course. Anything to wrap it up at all, Lord Bark, at all? Oh, okay.
Thank you. You're very useful discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, like I say, I think members have been heavily involved in that. It is worrying when you see 16, 17 offences rose by 33%, but I suppose the goodish news is it is seen as a plateau at this moment in time, and hopefully the trend will start going the other way.
Or you could be celebrating the fact that we're finding more because we're doing more effectively. That's the difficulty with these numbers. It's hard for anyone to call it. Chair, sorry, I've got some people need me to sign some stuff, so I was intending to excuse myself after this item finishes, if that is okay, and if there are no more questions. And then apparently I'm on Radio Leicester, says the lady at the back of the room who keeps waving at me.
No more questions at all coming, because I'm going to suggest to the panel, and I'm going to move the recommendations at 4, 5, 6 and 7. All okay? Thank you very much, members. The item we've all been waiting for, agenda item 11. Lord Bark, you're more than welcome to leave us now. And also
I think I can probably take the hint at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Much work to do back at the office, of course.
Agenda item 11, special interest group. It does follow on from our last meeting. It's a report to the Secretariat. It is all to do about a special interest group across the country being informed, whether we join it, whether we don't. You will remember you and I did go down to London at some point. 19th of April. Was that long ago? Was it 19th of April? It was an all-day meeting scheduled. In reality, we did look at the agenda and we thought it should be over by 12 o'clock, and I think it was over by about 12:30, wasn't it? And left all the others with pre-arranged tickets to stick around in London for quite a while. Ewan and I were lucky we had any time return. So, Ewan, if I could ask you to present the paper, please. Thank you.
Yep, so some of the other police and crime panels nationally are getting together to form what's called a special interest group under the Local Government Association. And the terms of reference for the special interest group were agreed at the steering group meeting on the 19th of April, which Councillor Rawson and I attended. I've set them out in the report, so I don't intend to go through the whole of the terms of reference. So the special interest group is going to be called the National Association of Police, Fire and Crime Panels, though I must clarify, it is a special interest group, not a national association. Now, if you perhaps need any clarification on the difference between the two, perhaps you could ask Lauren, because I'm not entirely clear myself. And it is quite confusing, but at the steering group meeting we did discuss this confusion, but they felt it was better to call it a national association because members of the public would understand what that was, and it would sound of parity of the National Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. So at the steering group meeting on the 19th of April, there were 15 police and crime panels from elsewhere in the country who committed to joining this special interest group. And I think later on in the meeting, another 3 turned up and committed to it as well. So I think that was about 18 on the day. And there may be other panels who have subsequently agreed to join or maybe considering joining. And as I understand it, the application for the special interest group has already been submitted to the LGA. So this is up and running already. It's going to go ahead whether Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland Police and Crime Panel join it. So what the panel needs to decide today is whether the panel wishes to join and various other matters about the funding. So there is a subscription fee to join the special interest group of £500 per police and crime panel that joins it. So we did have discussions about what the £500 would be used for, but they were very unclear on that, and it wasn't decided. There was some discussions about whether it would have its own website, etc. But at the steering group, that wasn't decided at all. So the question is, A, does this police and crime panel join the special interest group? And B, if they want to join, how does the panel go about paying the £500 subscription fee? There is a possible option that the subscription fee comes out of the Home Office grant, which is given to each police and crime panel to carry out the functions, which partly goes towards the salaries of the officers that help support it, also goes towards other expenses. At the steering group meeting on the 19th of April, Tim Hutchins, who is the chair of the Hertfordshire Police and Crime Panel, gave us verbal confirmation that the Home Office would permit the subscription fee to be paid out of the Home Office grant. However, other members who were at the meeting such as the lady from the Local Government Association, wasn't quite so clear on that point. So Councillor Orson and I asked for written confirmation from the Home Office that they would definitely allow the subscription fee to be paid out of the Home Office grant. I have been chasing this confirmation all week. It has not yet arrived. As I understand it, the matter is now with the legal advisors for the Home Office, and we have yet to receive the written confirmation. So I cannot give you a guarantee on that issue. The alternative, if the panel cannot use the Home Office grant for the subscription fee, is that the panel pays for this from other means, which in effect would be that the £500 would be divided amongst the authorities that are represented on the Police and Crime panel, which would mean that a £50 payment would be required from each authority. Obviously, we couldn't expect the independent panel members to contribute. So my recommendation in the report, I'm afraid, is a conditional one, and it may have to, your decision may have to form a conditional, and maybe in two parts. So firstly, you need to decide whether you would like to join this special interest group, and secondly, if you do like to join it, how you go about paying it. If later confirmation does come that the Home Office grant can be used, would you like to use the Home Office grant, or would you be happy to contribute £50 each per authority? Thank you.
A couple of things to add on. When it comes to the money side of it, we've had a letter from Leicester City Council confirming that they will pay the £50. Was it letter? I think it was a letter, wasn't it? No, just an email. It is an email, is it? Yeah, an email. Malise will be able to say that Melton will also pay the £50. Janice, are you saying Hinckley will?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, hang on then. If you're going to speak, can I just let me finish off on my other notes, and then we'll come back to you there. Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
They did set up this special interest group. They were very keen on it, actually. There's no doubt about it. It was all pre-arranged, and actually this guy from Hertfordshire, he actually proposed at the start £1,000, didn't he? No background to why he said £1,000 or why it was necessary, or just literally a figure out the sky. Pulled it down. In the event, they did have an election of chair, and we've got a guy who is an independent member from the Essex force area. Cannot remember his name. Johnny, who was the only nominee. We have two vice chairs, I remember. We only have two vice chairs because only two people wanted to put themselves up for election, and I think it would just save the embarrassment of one person losing. So it was just as easy to have two vice chairs. Like you did say, we seriously did try to find out what the money is going to be used for. It was difficult, there's no doubt about that. But I think it's all accepted that any special interest group would have expenses. The LGA will give some scant secretarial support to it, with it being a special interest group, but Essex Police Crime Panel will give the main function there. But it's not clear whether that £500 will be used to pay Essex or not. But Essex seem to have put the hand up, although we've seen no actually written word on that from Essex themselves, have we? Or have we?
I've been receiving communication from an officer at Essex Council who he's already started the administration for the special interest group.
And just for your reference, when it came to the various votes, I abstained on every single vote because I had no authority to go one way or the other from yourselves. I believe we've got a number of people who want to talk. I know the first one I saw was, say, Janice, and then I think you've got a list after that, Mike. Yeah. So, Janice.
Yes, Hinckley and Bosworth have expressed a wish to join. Obviously, they want to know more of how the money is going to be spent, but they are happy with joining. My question is, individual authorities, when you pay your when the £500 is paid, they're not going to give local authorities a receipt. Am I correct? But the local authorities will, if you look at 17 on your page, April 2018, it was confirmed that a separate invoice for the £50 contribution would not be sent to individual authorities, which make up the Leicester invoice for the whole 500, which would be sent to the host authority. But how are those other authorities going to have a paper trail of the £50 that they paid? Thank you.
As I understand it through you, and if we agreed to each authority paying £50, this monies would be paid over to Leicestershire County Council. Once all authorities have paid, Leicestershire County Council would then submit the £500, but only once all authorities have contributed. So there would be a paper trail. Okay, try. If we agree to each authority paying £50, that monies would be paid to Leicestershire County Council, who collect the money. Once all authorities have paid the money, the County Council would then pay that subscription, so you would have a paper trail. If one authority does not pay the £50, that would mean our position fails and the £50 would be returned to each authority. I'm going to take Deborah next because I understand she wants to go.
Yeah, sorry, Chair.
Before we move on. Yeah.
I've got another appointment to go. Just to let you know that Charnwood are happy to pay the £50 if that's what's agreed by the panel. All right, thank you.
Sorry, you ought to send it to the government.
Yes, sorry, if I could just give some further clarification on Mrs. Richards' point and paragraph 17 in the report. Yeah, I'll just explain that. At the steering group meeting on the 19th of April, Mr. Orson and I asked whether they would send invoices directly from the centre to each district or borough rather than sending it via Leicestershire County Council. They said no. So they will be sending one invoice from the centre to Leicestershire County Council on behalf of the Police and Crime Panel, and then it would be up to Leicestershire County Council to forward those invoices on.
We have Stephen next, and then Ratalau.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The Leicester City Group obviously agreed to join this panel and would agree to the £50 as per Sir Peter Soulsby, but we would obviously prefer that it comes out of the PCC grant if at all possible, because I do share Janice's concern that although it's only £50, we need a paper trail for our accountants to show where it's actually gone, and just issuing one to the county is not really very good. And I've got a second point, but I'll wait.
It's very appropriate. Our legal advisor comes in at this point in time.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add, I think probably what we would do is manage this a way in which we manage when we get a joint bill from solicitors, if there are several parties to a proceedings, and the apportionment of that is between different parties. So it may be the City Council and the County Council. One party would pay it, but we would in effect issue an invoice to the City Council saying 1/7 contribution towards the fee for membership, £50. What I'm not sure about is whether there's any VAT issues around that, but it hasn't been expressed as a payment plus VAT because we'd have to deal with that. So there will be a paper trail for each authority to the extent of an invoice from this authority saying, contribution of a proportionate share. I hope that helps a little, and certainly that's how we've dealt with other similar sorts of scenarios, and we haven't had any problems with that from a sort of technical accounting perspective.
The second point is an operational matter. It has been suggested that the Chair attends this meeting on behalf of this group, which I have no objections to. The issue is that the Police and Crime Commissioner does not have fire within his portfolio, and there are going to be issues there discussed which relate to fire, and I don't believe that the Chair should be voting on that given that we don't have fire responsibilities here.
Yeah, if I could just say a few things about that particular point. At the steering group meeting on the 19th of April, they discussed I think there's about half a dozen of the other panels who are getting involved with fire at the moment, and there could be more. And the way they were looking at dealing with that was they were putting those in contact with each other, so they could perhaps be sharing information and practice and procedure and everything. So I'm not anticipating that this panel would be particularly involved in the fire aspects of it. But yeah, I think it's a fair point to say that this panel would keep out of those particular issues. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Rattanell there, then Lee. Yep.
I think, Chair, I think Steve asked that question, so I'm happy with your response. But my only question is, I know Steve said the chair of the panel will go to this the new group. Who else will be going from the panel itself?
To be honest, there is a lack of clarity around exactly how the meetings will work. This is all yet to be decided, whether they're going to invite 1 member per panel, 2 members per panel, how often the meetings are going to take place. So we really can't give you more detail on this point at the moment.
So just to supplement on, when is the next meeting?
We don't even know if a first meeting has been arranged yet for the special interest group. We know that it's going to be reviewed at the annual conference for police and crime panels, which takes place in November. So that's when they're going to re-look at the chairman of the special interest group. But whether they're going to meet beforehand, I don't know.
What I'm going to suggest, Lee, whatever we decide, we review in 12 months' time when we've seen how it works. I have Lee and then Kevin next.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's. I don't have remit to spend £50 on behalf of Labour, but I wouldn't see as being a problem. I think it's just what we'd get out of this. I think Leicestershire is well. I think we've done a good job. I think we're one of the leading forces. I think the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office finds good practice. I think the Chief Constable finds good practice, and I think our officers on behalf of this committee as well also bring good practice, and I think we've done well. So I just question the value, and I think the only thing is, it seems to me they're trying to run before they can walk with what we're being presented here. So perhaps a more formal structure before this was decided on. So that's my comments, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Kevin, then Manjula.
Thank you, yes. Following on from the comments I made last time when this was brought up, my views haven't changed at all. There's so much unclarity that's surrounding this that I can't see how you can vote and move forward with something where you've asked questions and nobody can give you an answer. So for me, it's 8A is the recommendation that I will put forward, and that is that we don't become a member of something that you don't even know what it's all about, because the people that are organising it, they don't know what it's all about either. So there's no clarity, there's no value, as it's been mentioned, as to what it's for and why. Is it becoming a talking shop? The cost is £500 should be, if it's going to happen, it should be paid by the Home Office and not districts. Equally, that £500, what's it going to be said? What you're going to use it for? Nobody knows. What are the hidden costs associated with this, about travel costs, going to meetings, etc.? Who's going to pay for that? Is it going to be a member? Is it going to be officers and members? That's not clear in this at all. Where is it going to come from? For me, there's so much there's so many questions that are unanswered, and you've actually alluded that to yourselves. That how can you move forward with it until they decide what it is that they want? For me, the value of it and how it's going to impact on what we're trying to achieve, both strategically and operationally, that's not there either. I'd hate to think that you go along. £50 is not something I'm going to go back to my authority to say pay £50, forget it. Until such time as I get clarity of what it is and what the impact that will have on my community. That's how I feel at the moment, Chairman. Sorry.
Manjula and then Rafael.
Thank you, Chair. I said in principle, it's always good to have a network of working with different authorities, how they are managing the crime and everything. But this one, if the, like also Stephen has said, fire in it, when we are sitting together, because we are here as a police crime commission panel, the fire authority, they should have their own. Recently now, Grenfell Tower, that's a good example. Now the police is going to take on the fire authority for breaches of many issues. So when you are sitting there, which side will you vote? For the fire or for the police? And is this fees annually or is it for 4 years, £500? And if it is annually, if we see there is no value, it's not the £50 that no value in this association, then is there terms of reference? Can you withdraw from that and not continue for the next year? I know it's a new association, but we have to see within a year what is the advantage and benefit to Leicestershire and Rutland.
Yes, I understand. It's an annual fee of £500 per police and crime panel. So I believe that at the end of that year there would still be the option to withdraw from the special interest group and not continue to pay the subscription fee.
And if you remember, Majula, I did say at best we review our position in a year's time as well. So.
Be good to see how other police crime commission panels are operating with the country.
Rutland.
Yeah, Chair, I think I have a concern. I think I'm raising the question from what Leah said and Kevin has said earlier. The SIG group, who are we tackling? PCC or the operation of from each forces? And what are we responsible? Are we responsible to Home Office on that principle? And whatever the outcome comes, are we going to come back to Leicestershire and present that presentation to PCC? You know, and that is, and I think Kevin raised a quite important question: the travel expense. Where is that going to come from? From each authority? Or I think we are raising the same question, or I'm raising the same question, because people have raised that question. Are we paying out of our own pocket in order to go to the respective venues by car or by the other means? Because these are the funding. When it comes to the money issue, there are a lot of questions. There's no clear strategy how the panel is going to work, and even people who raised the concern or brought the panel up, they're not sure at this stage how the panel is going to work. So I think clarification is required before a long-term decision has got to be made.
I will attempt to answer concerns on the behalf of what we heard, not on behalf of myself. Number one, on the expenses, certainly when it came down to going down to London, Leicestershire County Council paid for the train ticket for Ewan and myself. The aims of the panel are effectively to give it more clout, effectively. It's often been said by a number of people in this room, we could do with more teeth, etc., etc., and that's held right across the country. And I certainly support that view myself. The difficulty I do have is, though, if you give any panel more teeth, or all of us more teeth, where does that power going to come from? It can only come from one place, and that is it comes from the PCC's powers. So the PCC power is literally watered down that little bit. So is any government going to do that? My suspicion is, I don't know, but my suspicion is they won't, because the whole principle of a PCC, the elected PCC, is to be accountable to the electorate, of course, every 4th year, not to be accountable to the police and crime panel. Now, if you remember, since the PCC legislation was set up, their powers have been increased. For example, the fire service is an option. Remarkably few PCCs have actually taken that option at this moment in time. Willie clearly said before he got elected he would not be going down that road, and obviously he will keep to that until he hands over the baton, shall we say, in 2 years' time. So that's effectively where we are, but they are also looking for just a more central lobby of government to help police crime panels do their work more effectively. A lot of them believe they can do that with a more special interest group focus rather than doing it on their own accord. That's why I'm sort of leaning towards
joining it for 12 months, but we're certainly with a review after 12 months to see if it does have a use, and it's easy enough to pull the plug then. And also it's mutual learning. I've always been a great believer that people in whatever profession should stick together a little bit. You have trade unions, you have the CBI, I'm a member of the National Farmers Union, and it gives you that sort of collectivity of lobbying together. So you feel better to have that strength. Now that last point is my own, but the other points are what we were told. Alan. Thank you, Chairman. You seem to have almost answered my question before I asked it. I do see it as being a lobbying body, bringing together all of the different panels. And I think that there is only one person in this room who could have a feel for whether that could be successful. Well, with apologies, two of you, but only one member who can vote here today, and that is your good self. And if your steer is that it might be useful for us to be a member and for you to attend to help set the direction of that special interest group, rather than not attending and leaving them to set their own direction, I'm happy to support you in that we should join at the beginning to help set the direction.
Yeah, sorry, I've just got to issue one word of caution. The terms of reference for the special interest group were specifically drafted to avoid use of the word lobbying, because they felt that this would cause them to fall foul of not being able to use the Home Office grant. So I think they're still trying to move in that direction without explicitly stating that they're going to be badgering government for various things. So to just wanted to caution you on that point.
Just very briefly, that is my understanding of what special interest groups do. That is their purpose. We've got two further questions. Kevin's already asked one, and John, is that? Yeah. Just before I go back to those two, the flavour I'm picking up. Do you tell me if I'm wrong here? If we get the okay from the Home Office grant, you're happy to go ahead? If we get the okay for using the Home Office grant, it's fair to say I've had an email from the leadership of this council, who is Mr. Sinnott and Mr. Rushton, who, through a third party, have stated they don't believe it is a correct use of the Home Office grant money. But having said that, it's the Home Office who will decide whether that's correct use or not, of course, at the end of the day. But I should report that they have sent that email through David Briscombe. Right, Kevin.
Thank you for
third time.
Sorry, I'll just. Well, first, I just need clarification, being a new boy on the block, if you like, from a police and crime panel point of view. From what I have read, and I could be stand corrected, that this police and crime panel is not a spending committee. It has no power to spend money. That's how I understand it. So we're dealing here with trying to raise money and then spend money. So I'm not quite sure the legalities of that. Secondly, are there other avenues you can explore? For example, most authorities, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, pay into the LGA, for example. So there's a body that you could that could take this on without trying to create another group. Lobbying, in the last paper, you're quite right. When the Home Office are not going to fund it if they feel it's going to be a lobbying group that challenges them. Bearing in mind they don't like being challenged anyway, so they won't fund something that holds them to account. So the money, the £500, won't be given if you start using the word lobbying. So therefore, again, from an indecision point of view, we're not sure how it's all going to work or where it's going to come from, the on-cost to all of that. So therefore, how can we say, yes, we'll do it? There's too much at stake to find out. £50 is only £50. Bearing in mind in America today, the cutting, the computer support for less able people, and we're going to say we'll set up another body that will talk about what and what's the impact it's going to have on us. I don't know what it's going to have, whether there's any value in it and whatever. They're all unanswered questions. If I thought for 1 minute that the people out there would benefit from it, I'd put my hand up. But at the moment, I don't know who's going to benefit from it, apart from having people travel in a car with expenses. And does it actually attract a special allowance if somebody goes? Is that something that somebody's going to, I'm now on another committee, there's a special allowance, I want some more money. I don't know. So please, let's find out what it's all about first, what the impact is going to be, what value it's going to bring before you say, well, we'll join it for a year and see what happens. I personally just cannot see how the value of that at all. I'm sorry, thanks for the opportunity, but that's how I feel.
Before I hand over to our legal advisors on your first question, all you need is one idea to come out of it, then you've got value for Obi and Wigston. Ewan and Lauren.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up Councillor Lloydell's first point about the funding for the police and crime panel, etc. So the police and crime panel is allowed to claim up to £53,300 per annum for the administration costs of the police and crime panel. So that has to be used for anything to do with scrutinising the police and crime commissioner. Plus, there is the option to claim £920 per member of the panel expenses. So that is the only funding that the panel has, which has to be used purely for the purpose of scrutinising the Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland Police and Crime Commissioner.
Well, I think that is the point that Ewan has raised, that this committee is not a spending committee, as you say, but what is being proposed is not an invitation to the committee to pay the subscription. It's an invitation to the constituent authorities that make up the committee. So I think that is a separate issue. I mean, no one's expecting this panel, unless the Home Office grant permits it, to somehow from where I know not to find the cash for this. So I'm not sure there's much else I can add, Chair, really, to what Ewan has already
You've
said.
answered the question.
Can I just make one observation, if it is helpful? I am a member of a SIG that is part of the LGA. It's the Monitoring Officers Group, which has a SIG, and I'm also a member of the another legal group that's a SIG. And it really operates by way of sharing information. It has a forum, so there's a space on the website where people can say, this is happening in my local area. Have you come across this problem in your area? How did you tackle it? It's got that sort of networking exchange of views. It does set up training events every now and again. There's probably one a year, I would say, something like that. That's an annual training event. This is, presented often by reps from the LGA or people from within the group. Sometimes say, I've had something interesting happening in my area. This is what we did. This is the case that's been through court or something like that. And that is dealt with through the SIG. It doesn't operate, the group that I'm on certainly doesn't operate in any sense as a lobbying group, but it's more about networking, sharing information, training, and having that forum where people can explore ideas. I don't know if that helps at all, Chair, or not, but I thought I'd throw it into the mix.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've sat here patiently listening to this, and I've got to be careful because, as you know, I'm substituting for Trevor today, and I would need to go and take a steer from our leader as regards to the financial side. But I think I lend my support to what your inclinations are, Chair, and obviously what the legal officer said. But probably more importantly, what Simon said earlier, which is in the report, as regards to partnering. Policing has changed beyond recognition over the years, and it's become more of a partnering with other sections of society to try and deliver this. And I see this in the same way. I share the concerns of Kevin, but I also see this as a learning curve, as a shared information. So I would lean towards, yes, I think we should do this for these 12 months because I think we can learn things off other authorities. We can see what's happening. We can take the good points and the bad points and try and work together to obviously deliver it. Because if we don't work together and work with the police like this, I can't see how we could do it. So I actually agree with what you're saying, Chair, and our authority will give the support at district. Thank you.
I spoke to Trevor this morning, and he more or less said North West will pay the £50 if that came through. Yep. I'm just looking around. Anyone else? Stephen, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. A couple of things. Forgive me if I'm incorrect, but didn't somebody say recently that the LGA would not support a special interest group financially or secretarially? That's the first point.
That wasn't said on April the 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lady called Ellie Greenwood who works for the LGA, and she has offered to provide some administrative support for this particular special interest group.
Essex will do most of it, but she will do the meetings in London.
Yeah, but they won't financially support it as an interest group. That was my understanding of it. Anyway, that's a by the by. The other questions are, how many meetings will there be a year? And I have a suggestion that we actually don't take a decision on this today, but bring it back to the next meeting once we've got the full terms of reference and how this is going to go forward, and that way we can make an informed decision.
The terms of reference are, as I've set out in the report here. I don't think there's going to be any amendment to the terms of reference. This is what has been agreed. With regards to how many meetings there are a year, we don't know that exactly. They did talk about holding virtual meetings. I don't know how that would work. But yeah, I can't say exactly.
There was mention of 2 meetings, 4 meetings. I don't think it went over 4 meetings, but I personally think 2 meetings would be more than sufficient. I think we're finally exhausted, everyone. I think everyone is exhausted. Well, I'm going to ask Ewan now. Can you just remind us where it's got to with the Home Office? You said they've moved it upwards, your email.
As I understand it, the Home Office are seeking advice from their legal department. All the indications I've had are that the Home Office are going to allow it, but we have yet to have the formal letter confirming it. So that is where we are.
Date of next meeting is when? I suppose that's on the back of the paper, back of the camera.
It's not long, actually.
25th of July, so what's that, about 5 weeks, 6 weeks? About 6 weeks, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm going to suggest that we bring it back on the 25th of July, and then the decision will be made at that point, now, whether we got the Home Office clearance or not, okay? Does everyone satisfied with that? Yep. Yep. Okay then, is that it? Yep, that will do that paper. Thank you very much. I don't know whether I need to bother to say date of next panel meeting, but it is the 25th of July, City Hall, 1 p.m. I'm not aware of any other items as urgent, so I declare this meeting as finished. Thank you very much, everyone, and safe trip home. Thank you.